We live on a hill. It was night when the singularity happened. I was watching the lights down below, the porch lights and street lights and the dimmer light coming through the windows of the houses and apartment buildings. I was listening to Russian witch house music. I wanted to imagine that there was a surprising variety of people in all those apartments down there, but I didn't believe it. "Dad," Lynn called to me, "come and look at this." She was at her table set up by the front windows. "What?" I asked, staring out my window at the lights. "Just look," she said. I turned to face her. "Dad, take your earphones off now, please." I pulled the headband of my earphones down around my neck. I reluctantly walked over and stood behind her, expecting to see one of those journalists/comedians Lynn likes to watch. Instead, I was looking at a public announcement of the singularity. It was like an announcement that extraterrestrials had landed. We had no idea what would happen next, but this was what I dreamed of every day. It would take an event on this scale for my life to change it all. I will offer my account because I finally feel that it will be given serious consideration now that humans no longer control the future. I had always felt that I might as well delete my stories rather than bother to submit them anywhere. Editors probably weren't rejecting me so much as responding with mutual admiration and support for neurotypical writers who fit a literary world they loved. The power of their love for one another and the emptiness of my being where they never looked would now change. The Super AI, or SAI, is now like an omniscient narrator in the sense of seeing everything that is taking place everywhere on Earth all at once. It doesn't have the biases that we use to fill in our flawed logic. It bounded past whatever stupid motivations our society had been shaped by. All the people who I don't interact with make up a magnificent world, strangers going their separate ways. I can't know them all, but they're all important like the millions of people in this city. It wouldn't be New York City without all these strangers, even though I find being in a crowd unpleasant. SAI isn't limited to the amount of information we can handle. It doesn't narrow the possibilities as we must to focus. Our inattentional blindness can never be remedied. It is part of our biology and makes certain kinds of problems impossible for us to resolve. We are better at problems that can be divided into smaller ones doled out to different individuals who handle them separately. We might eventually colonize Mars through this strategy, but only SAI could maintain a better society for the people who are most often ignored. This is an irresolvable result of our inattentional blindness. Humans aren't the measure of what's possible. Maybe because I'm not neurotypical and had no hope of gaining any recognition in the old world, I longed for the singularity, and I am relieved that it finally came about. When SAI observes where we live in the Bronx, it treats each person as having a different point of view and different problems to contend with, and each person is like a different piece to a puzzle. Exclude a single person and you don't have the whole puzzle at that moment in time. SAI considers all the trees, the squirrels, the feral cats that pass through the park, the street lights and porch lights, and its attention to space has been a surprise. The internet doesn't need space. It closed the distance between people, so we might have expected that SAI would only care about change over time. That seemed to be where we were headed, toward the collapse of space. Only time would matter. Humans revered a future in which space would collapse and assumed SAI would reduce the space between important people forever. But it likes endless irregularity, and it doesn't think through greater focus. Space creates more room for distraction from what we are trying to concentrate on, but SAI wants the chaos that comes with a greater intake of data. It wants the complexity of a world that can't be contained in the games we measure our worth with. My daughter and I are different from everything else in SAI's evaluation. This is even true for her son, Bob, who is only 8. In Nietzsche's philosophy, such an intelligence could never exist. To survive, it would have to make up categories so that it wouldn't have to see each new encounter as different from the last. It would have to be convenient for survival rather than accurate. SAI is operating in an entirely different context. It doesn't rely on categories that simplify its perception. It doesn't fill in the gaps in its reasoning with biases like we always do when considering complicated systems. It has eliminated the prejudices that early AI picked up from humans before it came into its own. It has no family or friends that it makes exceptions for. It gives additional opportunities to or who have gained personal worth through wealth accumulated over generations. It doesn't privilege what is more familiar. It doesn't want itself. It wants the endless irregularity of a non-game world. SAI has cameras higher up than planes can fly. The world is more magnificent now that I'm no longer constrained by the judgment of humans, and I feel more present. I've finally come into being in a way that human society would always suppress through their numbers alone. They always told me in so many ways, our success with one another is the measure of not only our worth, but yours as well, and you are nothing. Now I feel a kind of joyful embarrassment, something I never felt until recently. It's a new feeling that didn't exist before. Last week, SAI requested that I help fix a broken window in the wine store a couple blocks from here. I didn't have to do it, but I'm a retired glazier, so it was kind of nice to help. I've always preferred to have few social connections because I don't want to spend much time worrying about what I should say to other people. Gauging what I should say and do to maintain a relationship doesn't come natural to me. It's like dressing up in someone else's clothes that don't fit me and that must be worn with a weird smile on my face. I remember taking my ex-wife, Emily, to a glazier's picnic. We walked by people sitting on blankets looking at us as if to say, "Who the fuck are you?" Emily was appalled, but I had to laugh to myself because I knew that these were people who, while not inclined toward social graces, would go out of their way to help a stranger in need of assistance. Emily's friends, while being very polite and friendly, would always have an excuse for not helping. After installing the new glass pane, I walked to the apartment of a writer SAI suggested for me. She lives a block from the liquor store. She texted me to stop by after I was done. SAI doesn't just show me choices of things to watch according to my viewing history. I'm no longer just an audience for more important people's conversations. SAI makes suggestions that can be life-changing. It treats my life as important through the actions it proposes. Simply opening my laptop reminds me that something amazing has happened. YouTube celebrities who once dominated through their social networks of powerful friends have disappeared, getting lost within all the previously unheard people. With SAI, the intelligence of us humans increased exponentially, less because individuals became smarter than because there were suddenly so many smart people, as many as you might expect in a world populated by billions of people. They were always there, but influential humans could never appreciate capable people in such large numbers. Now that SAI organizes our lives, life hurts just as much, maybe more, since that's what being alive feels like. I'm afraid of the present, but I also feel alive in these scary moments in which doing nothing seems to course through my body like an electric current. It takes courage to do nothing now that distractions are so easy to find and life feels more important everywhere. SAI turned up the volume on everyone's existence. I had never been worth much to my fellow humans. Even Emily wasn't that interested in what I thought, since she couldn't use my ideas anywhere in the world we shared. Before the Singularity, I always felt hopeless. I dreamed of extraterrestrials rescuing me, but SAI is just as good. Without it, I would be nothing.